the 905er podcast with me, Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And this week we're welcoming back for the fourth time, Alan, I think. Alan Can, our friend, frequent visitor from the Municipal Matters website, munipolymatters.substack.com, if you want to check that out, to talk about all the latest from across the region as we get down to the last few weeks of the municipal election campaigns. Just to discuss what's going on across the region, pick out a few of the more interesting stories that are flying around at the moment, and see where we are as the kind of picture emerges of where the most interesting races appear to be happening. Welcome, Alan.
Oh, thank you, Roland. I'm very glad to be here once again.
Yeah, so, I mean, I know you're busy in all kinds of ways at the moment, but what are the stories that have sort of grabbed your attention over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so by the time we're recording this, we are exactly 3 weeks before the election on October 24th, municipally across Ontario. And from my area, I guess in mainly Peel region, I noticed that in Brampton, it seems to be just a number of just really wacky things happening, to be honest. I went to the campaign launch of Brampton mayoral candidate Nikki Kaur that happened, I think, just a few weeks ago, back in late September. This was actually originally scheduled to be earlier, but it was postponed on account of the campaign office having a car crash into it a few weeks ago. Leading to campaign manager Nick Kovalis making accusations that it was somehow Patrick Brown causing it, and which I believe the mayor has vehemently denied, and led to criticisms of Ms. Kaur using, I guess, some aspect of sexism or also in politics to blame her main competitor. But what I noticed was it was funny because her office is actually located in an old TD Bank branch building. So when I went in there, it used to be a bank. The space looked like it could only fit about 50 people. I believe by the time the event was at over or at its peak, it was like 500 people and counting, streaming in and out. Oh, wow. I almost felt claustrophobic trying to find a spot to stand, and she had a podium right by the customer service desk that's in front of every branch bank branch. So it's almost like, metaphorically speaking, I, Nikki Kaur, am serving you, the people of Brampton. And she got an opening speech endorsed by former Brampton Mayor Linda Jeffrey. And she went into a speech talking about something interesting about how Patrick Brown is apparently using City Hall financial resources to as part of a lawsuit of some kind. And I was told by a local lawyer that I was with at the time that, I don't think that's been publicly revealed yet. So I'm not sure why she's saying this stuff out loud. But in any event, if you can fit about 500 people into a space like that, there must be some attention being drawn to your campaign. Whether a good chunk of those people were like spies from other campaigns or not. But
but Nikki Kaur is the biggest threat to Patrick Brown's re-election, if I'm not mistaken. The fact that you have Nick Kuvalis chairing her campaign is a pretty big get on her behalf. I mean, he's no small potatoes in terms of political operatives in the province. So, all in all, like, does she have momentum behind her to? Because I mean, right now everyone's saying Patrick Brown's walking into a re-election handedly. Does she have momentum to possibly change that narrative in the next 3 weeks?
The campaign did look like as though it was very organized, and there were people going around during the launch event to sign you up for signs, sign you up to volunteer. I have seen pictures of her teams have gone out of canvassing before, and if you got okay, anytime you can get former Mayor Linda Jeffrey and former Brampton Councillor Elaine Moore, who were butting heads with each other during their time on council, to be in the same room to endorse Nikki Kaur, then something must be said. Other than that, it remains to be seen. I still think Mayor Browns is still the odds-on favorite. I mean, it's his to lose at this point. What I did notice was a very funny controversy that sort of erupted online just this past week. Apparently, about 100 of Nikki Kaur's signs were misspelled. So the word Brampton was spelled without the P in the middle. So it came off as spelled Bramton, and there was some flack being made by former Liberal strategist Warren Kinsella about, hey, if this lady wants to be mayor, she can't even spell Brampton correctly. And then led to other people making charges that, with all these like crazy controversies and serious allegations leveled against the incumbent mayor, and all you can focus on is a spelling mistake, I don't know where your priorities are.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean...
It's just one of those side stories that are just ridiculous.
It's a side story that can define your campaign. I mean, I remember, was it the NDP election? I can't remember, it was back in 2014 or something, and they just had a kind of unfortunate graphic design on their bus or something, and and obviously it doesn't tell you anything about the candidates or the campaign. But it can set a tone. And I mean, it's amateur hour, isn't it? I mean, when I had lawn signs designed, I mean, you had one design, it got sent to the people, they printed it. I don't see how 100 could ever lose the P. It's kind of a weird thing. It's like these are done from.
I also have to wonder whether that is a common mistake, especially with the demographic of Brampton. With English not being the first language of a good chunk of their citizens and residents, then maybe it's a common spelling error. But it could be just I would say it's an honest mistake. I mean, it's only 100 signs. I believe Kovalis did text out that he was going to get it fixed immediately. They were being recalled.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But there's something. But there is. Here's the thing. You're going for the top job in your pond, right? Like if you're going, you want to say I'm ready for prime time, so to speak. And it's little stuff like this. It's not going to make or break your campaign. I mean, this is going to sink it, but it does make people say, "Come on!" Like if you're gonna misspell, if you can't even spell the city that you want to be the mayor of, how serious am I going to take you? Think of it this way: if you had in your resume, right, to a prospective employer, no matter how great you were, no matter how much experience, no matter how much expertise you had underneath your belt, if you misspelled the name of the company that you're trying to work for, I guarantee you that application is going right in the shredder. So there is something to be said here, like, guys, if you're going to run, get your act together, spell check.
Although I would say, if I can offer some free advice to campaign strategists who are listening, maybe it's a way to spin it. You are trying to get the P, aka Patrick, out of Brampton. So I don't know if
that's see that you got Al, you got to keep these ideas to yourself. This is like PR gold here. This is crisis management 101.
Maybe I'm just putting it out in the universe out there for future career opportunities.
Well, and on the basis that all publicity is good publicity, a whole bunch of people now know Nikki Carr's name who did not know it before. Yeah. Not the best way to get the publicity outside Brampton that you would like. I mean, ultimately, it's absolutely correct that the allegations against Patrick Brown, including apparently ones that haven't even become public knowledge yet, are so constant that he has far more questions to answer than she does. But it does seem a bit like she's the default given people are supporting her because what other option do we have? Like you say, I mean, sure, Nick Kuvalis is a big name in terms of having someone to manage your campaign, but Is he managing it because he thinks she's going to win, or is he managing it because she's willing to pay the money? That's the question I'd maybe ask.
I'm not sure. That's a good question, and I'm gonna leave that to other people to think about.
It certainly seems like a conservative running against a conservative, and Jeffrey obviously is picking the lesser of two evils. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I was wondering if I could just bring up one other minor point about Brampton. There is a counselor here that's been accused of sexual assault by a woman during a trade mission to Turkey. And the story is apparently this woman told him 74 times, no, don't do this to me. And apparently he did not listen to her. So there's been a group out here called 74 No's, and they were planning to protest outside Dillon's campaign office during his campaign launch. Coincidentally, Mr. Dillon announced he had caught COVID and he had to isolate in his house, but that didn't stop the protest from happening. This protest basically wielded a truck that had an automated voice rereading the headlines about the allegations in English and Punjabi, and they had people protesting with signs in both languages. And get this, along with two people dressed as pigs, because the allegation is that Mr. Dillon is that sort of animal for having done this. There was even a poster that was drawn to basically make Councillor Dillon look like a pig. And I thought that was maybe crossing the line a little bit too far. But I don't know. That's what I meant when I said things are getting a little crazy up there.
It's really, Brampton is a city unto itself. I mean, it really is different. It's just different from the other cities in the region, and not in a good way. It seems to me. I mean, the history of their recent mayors is a cataclysm of disaster. Linda Jeffrey was the brief island of sanity where there wasn't a scandal associated with her, unless I missed it. I don't think there was a scandal associated with her mayoralty. But the previous two, I think there was, very serious scandals as well, like not little stuff. And then we have Patrick Brown, and I mean, my goodness, it's not a good situation, and it speaks to the inability of the provincial government and the powers which are meant to oversee the way that our cities run, to do a decent job of overseeing them, and to keep really pretty shady stuff out of the mainstream. It's not a good scene there, and it doesn't look like it's going to come to an end anytime soon, unless I'm very mistaken.
I just wonder, this is my editorial is Brampton kind of the city? Is a city that just doesn't take its politics seriously? It's a city that it's bought into the idea, like the municipalities, it doesn't matter who runs the city, or is this just all personalities?
I have a few people I know that used to live in Brampton, and they told me they've already moved out because they just don't see the opportunities, and they've sort of really given up on Brampton. It's very sad because I remember back in around 2014 or 2015, there was a special council meeting at the Rose Theatre to discuss the here Ontario LRT alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And that meeting, that was the council that voted to not accept the provincial funding that was 100% funded by the province, and instead to just cancel it and just keep the LRT stopped at Steeles Avenue and then not go into downtown. And basically, there were young people in the audience at the time saying, if you do this, we're going to have to move out. And then there were people shouting at them back saying, good, leave. And guess what? Those kids, they're leaving. So it seems like the quote unquote NIMBY crowd got what they wanted. And frankly, it's really hard to see where the light is at the end of it.
But again, you can't have honest discussions about policy. Like you want to talk about LRT, good public transit. What is a region public transit going to look like? And when you have Brampton and Mississauga, which literally are brushing up against the other, like they're literally touching each other, to say, well, let's integrate our transit system so that it's easier for people to move from one system to another, a truly regional system. To not have that leadership appear at the municipal level to say, listen, we need to think differently if we want our city to survive into the next generation. And it's just a real shame that that vital public debate didn't materialize how it should have been with an honest discussion.
And I mean, I wonder if it's not so much that the city is not interested in its politics, but that I think patronage is very strong in a city like Brampton with high immigrant rates, with very cohesive, well organized in the best sense of the word, community groups, ethnic groups, whatever, where the leadership of those groups is very influential. Again, nothing wrong with that. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying here. Nothing wrong with that in theory, but that can kind of swing blocks of voters behind people who make promises in dark rooms. I mean, we're not saying it happens, but I mean, to an extent, this is the history of Hamilton too. That Italian or Portuguese or Croatian communities will kind of vote as a bloc to an extent, and that can be a very good thing or it can be a negative thing. And I know Patrick Brown has been the kind of master of.
There's a difference between
working those communities,
but there's a difference between an ethnic community looking out for its own interests, and there's another, and there is something we said about politicians that exploit that interest. Because there's nothing wrong with a group of people, various ethnicities, saying, listen, this is the concern for our community. We want opportunities and whatnot. But there is something to be said about a politician that instead of saying, we're going to, let's talk about integration into the Canadian dream. Let's work on that pathway for your community to enter into the society, so to speak. To just kind of exploit that and say, let's keep you as a block. You're no more good to me than you are just as a voting block or a space of financial support. Then say, yes, you have a large number of immigrants moving into Brampton. How to help them and achieve that entrepreneurial spirit and that entrepreneurial drive to create not just small businesses, but thriving business, national businesses. Businesses that go, global, based out of Brampton. Where's that champion at the municipal level? Because right now, all I'm seeing is are campaigns that like to go to the temples or to a mosque or to churches and cozy up to whatever ethnicity I'm visiting this week, and ask for your support. And then next week, as long as after the election, that's all I need you for. And there's just something really short-sighted about that, and that I worry about that kind of politics taking root in a city like Brampton or any city in the 905.
I mean, is this a justified accusation, Alan? Do you think it's way off base?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, it's not like what's been going on in Brampton the last 4 years. But I feel like Patrick Brown and the controversy surrounding him, the hiring practices, the accusations by Nikki Kaur when she was the whistleblower have become a really big distraction. But there's actually interesting. There's a third candidate named Bob Dosanjh Singh, and he might be trending not because he's really picking up traction in the polls, but because he's an older gentleman, but he's using TikTok as a platform to get out messages on a daily basis. It's nothing fancy. He just stands in front of the camera and he just talks to you. He's telling you Brampton and the Brampton this, Brampton that, and he's making connections between both Brown and Kaur as almost like he's saying they're two sides of the same coin, and he flips a coin and he's saying like that. He's using like physical objects as a way of supporting his arguments. He also made a video about the weird controversy when Patrick Brown had a hockey rink arena open so some of his friends could play hockey in there, and Mr. Singh dressed up in like a hockey jersey, complete with the gear, just in the video. And it's like some of my younger friends would tell me, "I'm voting for Uncle Bob because this is hilarious."
So it reminds me of that. There was a book, the book that came out a few years ago. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's about like a sort of an eccentric kind of political campaign that ended up winning the day. I mean, it was fiction.
That sounds like an episode of Black Mirror when there was like a cartoon character.
No, I know what you're talking about, Roland. You're talking about the book Best Laid Plans by Terry Follis.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh.
If you haven't read it, go read it, folks. It's hilarious.
Written before TikTok existed, but
it's pretty much how politics works.
But with the exception that the outsiders generally do not win. But that kind of sounds phenomenal, and certainly the point about two sides of the same coin. I mean, from my limited knowledge of this campaign, the two leading candidates seem like two sides of the same coin to me. I have to say. I mean, it doesn't mean that this gentleman is an excellent choice.
No, I mean, I don't know. He's making these videos. He does talk about actual policies. So going back to your point, Joel, that nobody's really talking about policies. He's talking about how there's a backlog in infrastructure construction because of permits are not being approved on time, that sort of thing. He's actually putting a hard hat on over his turban, so it's like, I don't know, he's illustrating a point. So as I said before, the guy's using he's dressing up, and I think he's like trying to use TikToks surprisingly to good effect, I would say. But it's just
we have a TikTok account, so Joe, can you go and look at this for me?
I think I have come across the way you describe it. I'm pretty sure I have in scrolling it. You know what? I would love to see just like that third party come from nowhere, that Cinderella story, like come out of nowhere and just come right at the middle and just be that third option for people. Because, I get the feeling that, policy takes a back seat, or just good, well thought out debate in terms of, well, we don't have to talk about decent infrastructure. We don't have to talk about a good transit plan or affordable housing, when all I need to do is just go, it's personality against personality. And I just need to go shop around to get my group out and convince this group out. And that turns off people, because there are people, I'm sure, in Brampton who are saying, I want good plans for my city. I want to know, like, what, in 4 years, what's my city going to look like, or how's my city going to be better? And it's something that, we've kind of rarely seen in any municipal election in this year, that really deep, interesting ideas or new ideas coming forward. So maybe this is the shot in the arm the race needs, but who knows?
Well, let's take a break there, and when we come back, we've got a couple more stories to look at across the region, and another one from Brampton, in fact. But let's take a break here, and we'll be back shortly. And we're back. And Alan, another issue you've been looking at in Brampton is the joint slates issue, which is kind of an interesting thing. Explain to listeners what joint slates are.
So this is where I get a little bit wonky here, in terms of so councils, like they have different ways of electing their members of council. Where if you're in Mississauga, or Roland, like if you're in Burlington, the person you vote for in council serves as both the city and the regional councillor. So regional is automatic. Same thing in Mississauga. In Brampton, it's not the same. Brampton does have 10 wards, but each ward is paired off as one electoral area, so like a riding. So the candidate that runs for city council and regional council, they both campaign in both those areas. And in effect, it's 2 wards, and you could say each ward gets a councillor, but it's not really. They both have to represent the same area, but one sits on just the city council, and then the other one sits on the city and the Peel Regional Council. I know it's very convoluted. I have like my own thoughts about how they should reform the system, but that's another topic altogether. Currently, there are 2 councillors that were elected as a part of a slate. There are 2 of Patrick Brown's more ardent supporters. Councillor Rowena Santos and Councillor Paul Vincente. Santos is the city councillor, and Vincente is running as a regional councillor. So if you go to their website, they actually have a website that is one for Rowena, and then you have a link that can redirect to the Paul Vincente's website. But they basically run on the same platform, and they did this 4 years ago to great success because they both got elected, and they're doing it again. I noticed another 2 candidates are running in adjacent wards in 3 and 4. There's a woman named Andrea Barrett, and apparently a photo of her sign I saw has the name of a city council candidate by the name of Carla Green. So Andrea Barrett, she is a former NDP candidate, and she came out in a press conference essentially backing up or being supported, I would say, by Patrick Brown, because Andrea Barrett at the time was making comments about the Gurpreet Dillon sexual harassment situation. Just for our listeners, Gurpreet Dillon was one of the councillors that was voting to fire the CAO that Patrick Brown had hired earlier this year. So it's almost like I can see sort of factions kind of just forming, but I'm also seeing this issue or this sort of trend where there are candidates who realize, hey, if we're both running in the same area, but one of us regional, one of us a city, maybe I can find somebody like-minded that believes in the same things I do and sort of run as a team. So you're not necessarily running a municipal political party. You're just confining that sort of dynamic in one geographic area. And just to conclude, I noticed that Oakville could do the same thing because each ward elects a town and regional councillor, but I don't see that happen a lot because either a lot of them are getting just acclaimed, so they don't need to campaign at all, or maybe that idea hasn't percolated there yet. So it's just something I personally noticed that was interesting to me.
It's something, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, people running for regional council have a problem kind of getting noticed. Now, in these councils, the regional councillor also sits on the local council. Is that right? So they still sit on 2 councils, but one has.
One can also sit on regional council and PO, and they are compensated financially for that role.
And in Burlington, it used to be somewhat similar in that there were so-called aldermen, who were the kind of junior level of councillors, and they were abolished back in the kind of Mike Harris era. I mean, I tend to think, well, the good side of all this is I tend to think councils, certainly, I think Burlington's council is much too small. There were 14 councillors at one point. Now there are 7 for a city that is 4 times bigger than the city that had 14 councillors. I think that's absurdly underrepresented, but that's that's another issue, really. But I don't know, it makes a certain amount of sense as far as I can see.
It's an efficient way to sort of like galvanize support, or at least organize your vote, because if you have 2 people that can articulate the same kind of platform, and you're both running in the same area, why not like combine your resources? Like even just the signs. I mean, if you could put both names on a sign, you can save so much on like just 2 people 2 campaigns having separate signs. Just use one set of signs.
What I wonder is why it's so unusual for, we wondered whether it might happen in Hamilton's election, that basically a slate of candidates would come forward and say, we're the new guys, vote for us to kick out the old guys. Now, maybe it's kind of partly academic, and a lot of the old guys have quit of their own volition, but not all of them. But you wonder why that doesn't happen more, and that people seem to be very wary of doing that, of kind of basically creating a municipal, a short-term municipal party, if you like.
I would be curious about that. Why, especially a city with a smaller municipal council. You'd think it would be so much easier for 6 or 7 people to say we're the candidates for change. And you're right, like you could, the part of the problem I think is like funding rules. Like you can't have one big pot of money
Yeah, that's a
paying
good
it
point.
paying into their like you can, but it's really weird. Like you'd have to start looking into a lot of your money going in and out. So I think that's one hiccup. But in terms of just aligning your message and maybe supporting, like maybe openly saying we are all of us this the change slate, the slate of the future, or whatever you want to call it, that could work. I mean, you could also do, you could do group fundraisers as well. You just have to figure out a way to make it clear this person's paying to this campaign and not that campaign. That's where it gets a little. I think that's why it gets a little messy. And also the fact that I would also point out the fact that at municipal level, I think you and I have seen it tends to be a bit more amateur hour. Like let's be honest.
Like we just talked about a mayoral candidate misspelling the city she wants to run.
Yeah,
I mean, to lead.
It is like, a lot of the time at municipal, especially when you're looking for ward councillor seats, it tends to be a bit more amateur hour. Like you don't have well polished politicians, saying the right things at the right time and doing the right photo ops. You just don't get that. And so you don't get that kind of thinking. It's like, well, this is what I got to do by myself.
Yeah. See, I would love to see some kind of civics organization lead some kind of municipal campaigning school, just something to educate people. It's no partisanship involved here. I've had questions of people asking me, candidates municipally, what party are you from? Liberal, conservative? I'm like, no, there's no municipal parties at City Hall. Maybe there should be, but it's not going to be like affiliated in that fashion. But I'm just saying that there should be some kind of educational program for candidates of all stripes who are interested in running at the municipal level or serving in local government to understand what the job they're running for is what you're supposed to do in that job.
Well,
I've seen council candidates campaign years ago that campaigned on stop the sex ed curriculum. Yeah. First of all, that's not in your purview. You can't. Even if you get elected, there's nothing you can do about it.
What you're talking about is honest to God revamp of the entire education curriculum to create and make sure that civics is more than just a one term, a one unit in a Canadian history class or Canadian civics class. You got to actively encourage civics education from, I would argue, grade 1, definitely all through high school, like grade 9 through graduation. Every year is a civics lesson to drive home. This is the division of power, and this is who you elect, and this is how politics work. If you did that, I think you'd have a lot more reasonableness in our civil discourse, because you realize that people complain about stuff. It is who's hosing you, who when you get, I mean, this is completely off topic, but when you get Pierre Poilievre yelling at you about housing price, you say, you don't deal with that. Like, that level of government does not directly deal with that. That's a different level. Why don't you run for that level of government? And if that angers you so much, and then you don't get people getting just, I'm angry, and driving trucks into Ottawa. But that's my complete tangent of the moment, and I'm going to take that as my sign to step out of this topic of conversation.
I will just briefly undermine you, not deliberately. I think is a good idea. But
cut his mic.
Yeah. I grew up in a country which had no civics education whatsoever, and I swear to God, people were a hell of a lot better informed about how the civic system worked. Why that is, I don't entirely know.
Yeah, but I would argue that led to Brexit, and that has a big one.
Yeah. Very good point. Well, I think that we're running out of time, but we've kept the best till last, people. So you'll be glad that you waited for this third story. And that's just an update on the scene in Hamilton, where last week there were a couple of mayoral debates. One was attended by there was a fourth candidate who we're not going to talk about because he's a racist right-wing POS, and we don't need to give him any publicity. But there are three candidates who are actual, humans, and Bob Bertino missed one debate because he was unwell. I can't remember if it was COVID.
I think he said he had COVID. Yes.
Yeah, it seemed to get better within 24 hours, which is odd. But anyway, whatever. The debates were quite fiery, and there was quite a bit of, well, I don't know. What do we think? Well, Alan, you kick off again. What's your take on what's on the Hamilton scene right now?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say I am jealous that local media in Hamilton or whoever had the plans to organize mayoral debates and let the public see these people in the public setting and have them talk to each other. That is very beneficial, I think, for the general population who have the vote, especially that it's all on YouTube. You can watch it anytime for each ward also. But what I've seen from some of the clips, it seems that Miss Horwath, who is seen as a front runner, if not outright leader in the pack in terms of becoming the next mayor of Hamilton, it seems she's still bringing the Queen's Park Andrea to the municipal level and not having evolved or adapted to becoming like a mayoral person. Instead, she seems when she was debating with Mr. Loomis, just seems to just keep saying that, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, even to the point you barely live here, like you just moved here, and that kind of attitude. And it seems to me Mr. Loomis is being more of the reasonable senior statesman, quote unquote, in terms of offering ideas and policy and saying, you realize whoever gets elected has to work with the Ford government, whether you like it or not at this point. So, and it's just funny to me because I remember Doug Ford issuing a press release the day that Andrea announced that she was running for mayor that, I may not agree with her, but I admire her passion. So best of luck to Andrea. It just makes me wonder, like, if Andrea does get elected, and she brings and the style she brings is the same that she had back in when she was a provincial politician, how well she's going to end up working with a former adversary. Where, I would say at this point, the person who's presenting himself as a clean slate and a new start, like Keenan Loomis, is probably in a better position now with 3 weeks left to pound that narrative forward than Miss Horwath or even Mr. Bertina.
I mean, I think you should say, like this podcast doesn't back candidates. We don't support anybody. I think we've probably been critical of all three of the leading candidates, and the fourth one, like we say, I'm not even going to bother talking about him. My impression when Andrea Horwath threw her hat into the ring, I kind of thought it was over. And the more time goes on, the less I'm convinced that's true. And all I can say, that's not partisan. It's not me backing one person over another. That's just my gut reaction based on whatever I can pick up. The thing that really didn't go down well in debates was Andrea Horwath, picking, not just once, but multiple times on this issue that Keenan Loomis is new to Hamilton. Well, he's not that new. I can't remember how many years, but it's multiple years. If that kind of thing works, it's the cheapest, lowest form of politics, in my opinion. It doesn't play well with recent immigrants, with people who've recently moved here. I moved here a year ago. Am I really so defective as a human being that I'm not allowed to have an opinion about the city I now live in, where I pay taxes? Give me a break. It's garbage politics, and it's disappointing to hear a candidate who's meant to be of significant stature go that way. My feeling is, if Andrea Horwath wins, and she may well do, it won't be Doug Ford working with Doug Ford that's the issue. It's how she can work and whether she can work with the other people in her own council. And I don't think that was always the question. It's always the question of any provincial politician who comes to municipal level. Like, do they understand that this is a different kind of politics? Evidence so far is Andrea does not get that whatsoever.
The thing that strikes me the most interesting about this in Hamilton is exactly that point that you made about when Andrea threw her hat in the ring, everybody said, well, this is done. Andrea's got this in the bag. She's going to walk away with this. And you're right. The more she has had an opportunity to speak on these, just speak as a candidate, the more I think people kind of looks at, not sure I'm comfortable with that. When she first made her announcement, there was no policy announcement at all. And she said, no, this is just my announcement. The policy will come later. Like your typical provincial politician playbook that, I'll be honest, has not served her well because she's not the premier, if I'm going to be honest. But, that was the playbook. Oh, it'll come later. And a lot of people say, well, we're eager to hear it. What are your plans, Andrea? How are you going to, where's your priorities for Hamilton? And she finally had a chance to present it. And a lot of people were underwhelmed. A lot of people said, there's nothing here. We've reached out to Andrea to invite her onto this podcast, say, we'll give you a half hour to talk your platform. We did the same to Keenan Loomis as well as to Bob Bertina to have an episode pretty much to themselves to talk Hamilton mayorship. Keenan Loomis was the only one who basically responded back, and you had the interview with him, Roland. There's something to be said about, like, people have, and I just want to finish off on this, because I find that Andrea's campaign has turned to a real amateur hour, because if you think about it, in the last 10 years, what was the biggest factor affecting people in Toronto? And that was the price of housing. And where do they move? A lot of them move to Hamilton. A lot of those people that make up Hamilton right now are people who are not born in Hamilton. They're not from Hamilton. They have no roots in Hamilton, but they left Toronto or they left someplace in the 905 and they moved to Hamilton. They said, I like this city. I like where my neighborhood is. I'm going to live here. I'm going to plant roots here. My kids are going to go to school here. And to have a Hamilton mayor candidate, I should say, basically coming up to the microphone and saying, Keenan, you've only been here for 13 years. You don't have a clue what's going on in Hamilton. You're not worthy to be mayor. I think does her a disservice and does a lot of other people a disservice. And quite frankly, your city of 500,000 people, more than that, wake up. Like you're not some small town where let's all the people who don't look like us, put them on the railroad and ship them out of town. If you want to be a world-class city, a top-notch city in Hamilton or in Canada, stop with this "you're not one of us" rhetoric. It's tiresome. It's old. It doesn't do anyone any good.
I completely agree. I mean, and I will throw one other thing into the mix, which is that, she's been MPP for Hamilton Centre for a very long time. And I may have only just moved to Hamilton, but I've been involved in Hamilton area politics, party politics in the past to a considerable level. That's to the extent that, I was involved in the party that was trying to run against a party leader in Hamilton Centre. And, everyone understood that, okay, she's the party leader. You're not going to see much of Andrea in Hamilton. She's got other things to do, and that's fine. Everybody got that. The people who voted for her got it. The people who were trying to run against her kind of got it too. And it's like, the ambition of, I don't think they ever succeeded. The ambition of the opposition parties in Hamilton Centre was like, let's try and get Andrea to come to Hamilton Centre because she doesn't need to, right? She's the party leader. The party leader's last place the party leader wants to be during a campaign is their riding. And that, again, I'm not criticizing for her, but basically all this says is Andrea hasn't spent a whole lot of time in Hamilton because she was a party leader in Toronto. So it doesn't even hold water from that perspective. So it's disappointing. I mean, again, there are no real polls at municipal level. I mean, there are a few that float around sometimes. I haven't seen any polls for Hamilton, if there are any.
There were actually some done by Main Street Research. That's the outfit run by Keto Maggie. It has some accuracy at times, and sometimes it might be a bit off. But they did some poll back in July and showed Andrea ahead, or at least with a plurality. But I don't know at this point. I mean, it's on my Substack if you want to go look at it. It's probably back in July or something. But
I mean, I would have expected it to be ahead in July.
but that was a snapshot in July. This is October. We don't know how things
I mean,
are.
going by I was driving around Hamilton yesterday, and between Stony Creek and where I am in closer to downtown. So two very different parts of Hamilton, and there was a difference in the lawn signs to an extent too. I don't think you'll find a whole lot of Bob Bertinas around downtown. There were a bunch of Bertinas out in Stony Creek. That's who he's playing to. He's playing to the suburbs. Andrea and Keenan have played to the more urban part of the city. However, it wasn't. You know, if lawn signs mean anything, which they do a little bit. Keenan and Andrea are quite close, and Bob Bettina, I would say, is in a good third place. Now, that's a very poor.
I think you're accurate on that one, because I mean, if you go on social media, and that's really the only poll we can have at this point, honestly. There seems to be a shift away from Andrea that I've noticed online, that the attitude is we're tired of the old, and Andrea has kind of painted herself. She's clearly aligned herself with I am a trusted face that you can rely on to be mayor of Hamilton, and I'm not sure that's going to serve her well this time around, because I think if you look at the writing on the wall, a lot of the old guard that were in Hamilton City Council voluntarily said, "I'm not running for re-election. I see the writing on the wall. I'm walking away. I don't want that defeat." And Andrea seems to be kind of running on this. I'm the trusted face of yesteryear that you can rely on to get you through tomorrow's troubles. And I'm not sure that's flying with a lot of people in Hamilton who there's a big drive to have, just we want new ideas, and we do want new blood in at City Hall.
And a final sort of thing on that note is I mean, I don't know. I still would put her in the. I was still, if I was laying bets, I would. Well, if I was paying out on bets, I would not be giving long odds on Andrea Horwath. I think she's probably the favourite, but again, I can only speak as I find. I have found that Keenan Loomis has talked about the issues throughout this campaign, and the other candidates haven't. Andrea Horwath, it does seem Andrea Horwath has kind of gone against the tone that we're looking for. Like, it's time for a change of everything at Hamilton City Hall. Like let's get some young, fresh blood in there. And maybe she's misunderstood that she's not. She used to be the young gun of the NDP, running against the old guys in the old parties. And maybe she's not properly understood that that's not how she's really perceived anymore. Standing when she stood on that podium with Sheila Copps, it's like, that is a terrible image for your campaign. Right at the start, to wheel out Sheila Copps, who is, the oldest grandee. You could, not old in years, but in terms of the Copps name in Hamilton, it's everything that is about old Hamilton is wrapped up in that Copps name. And in Sheila Copps' career, in kind of the old politics of the old Liberal Party back in the Chrétien years and before.
She's running on her name.
If I was running her campaign, I'm not sure I would have been too enthusiastic about having Sheila Copps stand next to my candidate.
You know what? Why don't we leave it at that for this episode? Because I'm sure there'll be plenty of other things to get our blood boiling over in the coming weeks. Alan, once again, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on, and to keep an eye on those stories in the 905 that tend to slip past our gaze, I should say.
Yeah, no problem, Joe. Roland. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Right. Okay, find the stop button.